Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of Through the Fire. I am your host, Ryan Wickline, and today we're joined by a very special guest. He is a real estate investor, author, and entrepreneur, Mr. Kevin KR Robinson. How you doing today, KR?
I I'm doing excellent. I'm so excited to be on your platform to share my story, my experience. I am doing excellent. I cannot complain.
Awesome. Yeah, like I said, you have a pretty amazing story about how you kind of got to where you are.
Yeah, I grew up in Philadelphia, a single parent household. My mother raised seven children on welfare. We moved about 18 times before I turned 18. So I grew up with a sense of instability without a margin of safety, didn't come from wealth. And so that pretty much was like my basis of trying to make sense of the world. And what I did is I turned my life around in middle school. I remember vividly, we lived in a studio apartment where we had a hot plate, no stove. We had a bathroom sheet, no bathroom door. We had a bathtub, no shower, and we had 15 people competing for space with rats and roaches and flies and one bed in North Philadelphia. And I'll never forget that moment. I remember my stepdad was there and he said, "Don't be an F up like me and everybody else in this house." Well, in that studio apartment, because I had siblings that were teenagers and they were pregnant year back to back. And so at that moment, I took the perfect from the imperfect person and started to shift my life. Prior to that, I was smoking weed, drinking, skipping school from fourth grade to eighth grade. I had three D's and three B's and one C. So I really didn't care about anything. But then I started to shift my mindset and was able to go on a whole different path and graduated first in my class in high school and debate captain, track captain, uh, played football and got a presidential scholarship and went off to Bowdoin College. And then I was able to work for Goldman Sachs and started getting into investment banking. And that's when the shift really started to take off.
Nice. How did you get the nickname KR?
So I got the nickname KR because my mother used to sell Mary Kay products. And my high school had about 2,700 students, and there were a bunch of people with my initials. So there'll be Kevin Robinson, another Kevin Robertson, a Kevin Robbins, a Kevin Johnson, a Kevin Durant, all these KDs, KR, KCs. So I said, how can I stand out? And I took the KAY to represent Kevin and the R to represent Robinson. So it started all the way back in middle school, eighth grade, when I started to just say, look, I'm trying to differentiate myself from all my peers.
I like that how you, even at a younger age, knew you had to differentiate yourself from everybody else. It definitely stands out.
Oh yes, yes, yes. So that's like I and then that was before I even knew anything about Dwayne Rock Johnson. So then I had said, oh look, we got something in common. So I thought that was pretty cool.
What lessons did you learn growing up in deep poverty that still guide how you build wealth today?
So I think what was so important, especially during that moment, I had that conversation with my stepdad where I started to want to shift my mindset, is that I came from a neighborhood where ownership wasn't something you saw every day. You saw survival, you saw people getting by, you saw talent, but not always direction. And I realized that if I would have kept going down the same path as everyone around me, I knew how my story would end. And I didn't want that for myself. And so what I did is I embraced what I call the three D's: desire, discipline, determination. Desire is what gets you going. It's what wants you to want more for life. It's that burning desire to get you up and get fired about things. But what I realized is that desire alone doesn't give you results. So you have to come up with discipline. And so what I started to do is I came up with routines. I would say, I got to get up, be present, show up every day, put forth my best effort, ask for help, come up with routines, because sometimes it's just you putting in the work. There's sometimes it's just going to be points where no one is clapping, but you got to get things done. And so, and then you have determination. There are going to be moments when there are going to be setbacks. There are going to be moments when you doubt everything, when it's much easier to quit than to keep going, when you feel as though life is taking more than it is giving. And you have to be determined, because you got to keep coming out the corner swinging no matter what the world throws at you. And so I really embraced this idea of the 3Ds, which is desire, discipline, determination. And so that really helped me shift my mindset and really do it in a practical way. And what I was learning from that, I started with the 3Ds, and then I evolved into the 3Cs, which is intellectual capital, social capital, and financial capital. And what I mean by intellectual capital, that pretty much is like you're getting educated in the classroom and or outside the classroom or both. And then the other thing is that I notice is social capital. So that's kind of like you're building these relationships, you're understanding how to navigate in these different worlds so you can affect change and put yourself in a better position. So I started to pay attention to how social capital works in these different settings, whether it was school, college, professional setting. And then the last one is financial capital, especially in America, a capitalist society. You have to learn how to access capital, how to preserve capital, how to grow capital. And so I went from the 3Ds to the 3Cs: intellectual capital, which is social capital, and financial capital. But then I had to keep going because I wanted to eventually hit that point where I was wealthy. And so that took the 3Rs, which is one, you have to build a track record. So when I got into real estate, I started building a track record to prove to lenders and other people, hey, I know what I'm doing. I know how to find these properties, manage these properties. I know how to monetize them. And then you have relationships. So you want to build meaningful relationships with contractors, with inspectors, with the government, with tenants. And so you're managing relationships. And if you do the first two really well, build a track record, build meaningful relationships, what's going to happen is that your reputation is going to precede you. And so doors are going to start opening because people want to be involved with you because you have a reputation of doing well, you're high integrity, you're trustworthy, you're delivering more than you say. So I always say under promise, over deliver. So I think those are the three key things I really focus on, which was the 3Ds, the 3Cs, and the 3Rs: desire, discipline, determination, intellectual capital, social capital, financial capital. And the last one, which is build a track record, relationships, and a reputation.
Nice. So you mentioned that you were kind of troubled kid in middle school and younger when you were younger. How many people, like when you told them, "Hey, I'm gonna get my life together and I'm going in this direction," how many people laughed at you?
A lot of people, actually, when I graduated from 8th grade, one of my friends wrote in my autograph book, "I can't believe you made it," because I had a bunch of siblings who got pregnant as teenagers and also dropped out of high school. So they were like, "You're going to go down the same path. You're smoking, you're skipping school, you're drinking, you're not focused. You're pretty much just like to have fun and be silly," which
Nice.
I had went out to prove people wrong. I got new friends, and I started to collect what I call what I started to create what I designed, which is my personal board of directors. I started to collect mentors the way people collect baseball cards. So I started finding mentors and sponsors to start filling in the gap because my parents and siblings, they didn't know how to navigate this college process or high school process to the highest level where you achieve the highest academic excellence and also outside extracurricular activities. So I started to reach out and say, all right, I got to put together my personal board of directors, people who can help me navigate this world that I aspire to be a part of. And so once I had a new environment in terms of friends and in terms of nurturing environment where people pour into me, I was able to start excelling. And I went from being a student that had 3Ds and 3Bs and 1C to graduating first in my class. From 8th grade to a senior year of high school, it was a total different class president, debate captain, track captain, school president, very different from my old way of approaching life. And I think it's because I was kind of upset and I really thought as though I couldn't control my environment because we kept moving. But then I started to realize, look, it's not going to be a magical moment where everything click. I started to have what I like to say, a series of small realizations where I had to be honest with myself and come to terms with the fact that nobody was coming to save me. Nobody was coming to rescue me. There was no blueprint. No one was handing me the answers. If I wanted to change my life, it was going to be because I changed.
I love it, man, because so many people like they don't get that part about it. Like you have to face those challenges yourself and find that inner desire and drive to do it.
Yes, that is so true. That is so true. The waiting for someone to save me, or even just being angry with everybody, angry with the system, angry with family members. I had said, look, I know that my parents and loved ones, they did the best they could do based on what they knew. And so I don't hold it against them because they didn't come from a wealthy family or a family all put together. So I can see the struggle and the hopelessness and tiredness in the adult's eyes when I was growing up. And I had said, I want more for myself. I wasn't 100% sure that I was going to achieve greatness, but I said, I'd rather shoot for the stars and hit the moon than shoot for the fence and hit the ground. So I said, I'm going to just keep going as hard as I can. And I always stress that if you do what's necessary, then you do what's possible, you'll find yourself doing the impossible. So I remember living in that studio apartment. We had very little and we lived on top of each other. In 2009, I bought one rental unit. 2018, I had 9 rental units. 2019, I had 35 rental units. 2020, I had 105 rental units. So I tripled my portfolio 2 years in a row. And in 2020, I bought 70 rental units. Now I have 160 plus, where I own 24-unit apartment building, 14-unit apartment building, some 12 units. And this is the young guy who actually was living in a studio apartment with 15 people with just a hot plate, a bathroom sheet, and a mini fridge and one bed, competing for space with Ratchet Roaches and my other siblings. And so now I'm able to say, if you do what's necessary, then you do what's possible. You can find yourself doing the impossible. And you don't have to have all the answers. I'm not self-made, I'm community made. My community poured into me, educated, opened doors for me, helped me understand how to navigate the next level and chapter of my life. And so that's what I'm most thankful for.
Yeah, I love how you brought that up, how a community formed you. So, like, how much would you say in its environment, you get around the right environment, you can accomplish anything?
I think the number one thing is that it's so important that you first come to terms with the fact that decisions and structure matters. So for me, I was in survival mode. I went from survival to structure to stability, financially, mentally, and emotionally. And the way that worked, when you're moving around constantly, you're lacking structure. You're just in survival mode. You're nervous. You don't know where you're going to eat. You don't know how you're going to get through the next thing. And then when you have some structure, and that could be an environment that's very structured where you spend time, whether that's a school or after school program, or your family just has one house and everybody's providing structure around what time you eat, what time you think, what time you do this, what time homework, and all those different things. Structure really matters. And that ties in what you're talking about, environment. And then what happens is that now you're starting to be able to get to the level of stability where you can start thinking, okay, I have structure. Now I can start building on that in terms of thinking about things financially, thinking about things emotionally, thinking about things socially. So it's very important that you be very mindful of your current situation. And you have to decide that, look, decisions and structure sometimes can outrun some of your current situations. And so for me, I tell people every day you have to go out and beat 3 people. One, you have to beat yourself, because sometimes you're gonna self-sabotage. Sometimes you're also gonna have self-doubt. And you're gonna be like trying to count yourself out. You have to get that mindset corrected so you're not beating yourself up. So you got to beat yourself. The other one is that you have to beat the ref. Whether there's an official ref or whether it's the system, you have to beat the ref because the calls may be going against you. And the third thing is that you have to beat your opponents. Sometimes there are going to be some people out there to get you. So I want you to be sharp, that you're beating those 3 things: beat yourself, beat the ref, and beat your opponent, because you never know what's coming your way. And so I just adopted that approach. And once you see new environments or experience new environments, you cannot unexperience them. You cannot unsee them.
Yeah, I love it. What inspired you to write your book, Can't Break Me?
So what really made me think about writing it was a number of people. came up to me and they said, KR, you have a really fascinating story, and I think a lot of people will benefit from it. So for instance, I came up with the title Can't Break Me because I wanted to provide people with a blueprint on what it took to be successful. Like, what are the steps I had to navigate in order to get to this level of success? Not just tell you it's a story, a motivational story, but it's a story about decisions. So when I went off the boat in college on a presidential scholarship, the same year, my brother, 1 year my junior, he went off to prison for attempted murder. He had to serve 12 to 20 years. And so every time I was getting ready to do something, it seemed as though life was trying to break me. When I was in business school, my second year, my mother and my dad had passed away, my biological parents, in the same year, one in the spring and one in around Christmas time. So I always say you have to stay unbreakable because the world sometimes is going to take more than it gives you. And so what I wanted to tell people is that, look, even though I grew up in Philadelphia, and I was a knucklehead and I turned my life around and I was able to go work for Goldman Sachs and graduate from an Ivy League school, get my MBA from Tuck School of Business at Dartmouth, is that I also have issues sometimes where I'm questioning things, where I'm nervous, I'm not perfect. I wanted to peel back the onion to let people know, look, don't be all excited just because you see the finished product. You want to figure out how you can take your current situation and transform it so it doesn't just benefit you, but everybody in your circle. I wanted to be in a situation where I had the ability to decide how I spend my day. What do I do every day? I wanted to be able to build something that outlives me. I wanted to be able to build something that can change the trajectory for my family. And so that's what I spent a lot of my time and energy about. And I wanted to break it down in a book so that people can have something they can take with them and say, all right, I understand this is a roadmap to navigate the world if you come into this world with very limited resources, or if you just feel as though you're stuck. Because sometimes you're just stuck. It's not about being wealthy. My parents got divorced. It's not about being wealthy. It's not about being black or white. It's about assessing your current situation and saying, how can I go from here? And that's what I wanted to lay out in the book.
Nice. I love it. What was probably the biggest challenge you faced while you're writing it?
I think the hardest thing when you have to go and write a book like this about your life is you have to relive, you have to reopen wounds that you had closed, that you haven't talked about and many times or even thought about. And so you're going down memory lane, and some of those memories could be good and some of them could be really painful. And so I had to have those tough conversations with myself, but also with friends and family so we can figure out what happened in my life. What was my response? How did I act when I was younger? How did other people act? What was running through their heads? And so I think that it could be therapeutic, but I also think that it can be so deep and so moving that you have to take breaks. And so I think that that is what was so interesting about the process is that you're trying to gather a lot of information, whether you're writing a personal journal or you're talking to friends and family or you're going through newspaper articles. You're just trying to figure out a lot of things in such a short period of time, especially when you're writing a book. So I would say that that was the most challenging thing, is to reopen those wounds and put it in a way that is thoughtful, that is not going to be overwhelming, and stories about other people that's really delicate. You want to make sure that you're very thoughtful so you don't
Yeah.
offend.
Yeah, I could see like where you'd have to take a break because some of that pain, like reopening up everything.
Yes, yes.
What's the biggest takeaway you want your readers to get from it?
The biggest takeaway I want my readers to get is that, look, this is not a promise. Um, this is not like one of those things. It's not a motivational book. It's not to get you all excited. This is a promise to myself and to anyone else out there that where you start in life does not dictate or determine your future. So don't let it hold you hostage. I want you to know that, look, you have control of your life. And once you come to terms with that and you're willing to be vulnerable, understand that no one makes it on their own. You're willing to find your tribe and say, all right, I'm going to try to figure this out. I want to be successful. Who can be my role model? Who can help me navigate this space? What does it take to be successful? I think that's the key takeaway I want for people when they read this book.
Yeah.
That the beginning is only the beginning. The ending
Yeah.
is up to you.
Why do you think so many people play that victim mentality and let like where they start stop them from succeeding in life?
Well, I don't necessarily think everybody plays the victim mentality. I do think that sometimes circumstances are incredibly tough, and especially when you're really vulnerable, where you're sometimes not the most educated, sometimes you don't have the most help, and you come from a broken home and you haven't dealt with a lot of trauma. So I don't necessarily call those people victims or think that they're embracing victimhood. I think that they haven't been taught how to process their current situation. And I think we want to embrace this idea that you treat people better than the way you want to be treated. You meet people where they are versus trying to make them be who you are. And I think if we show some compassion and empathy, I think that will help people cross that bridge from being in a moment where they feel lonely or they feel unheard or they feel hurt. Um, because I think that it's a lot going on, a lot to unpack. And I think that people sometimes don't know how to process that. So sometimes they self-medicate themselves, and sometimes they deal with what I talked about earlier, where you have to beat the three people, which could be first, you have to beat yourself because it could be self-sabotage, or it could just be self-doubt. You're questioning because sometimes where you, in a lot of respects, some people believe where you start in life is where you're supposed to end up. And it's really easy to start to believe that when everything you see isn't successful. Um, and I think that it's really, it takes a deliberate effort on the community and also the individual to break out.
Yeah. What daily disciplines separate people who succeed from those who stay stuck?
So for me, I think that you have to be willing to, number one, you have to be willing to be vulnerable, especially early on, because you don't really know anything. You don't have that much education, probably in many respects, or you don't have that much life experience. So number one is be vulnerable, be willing to ask people for help to navigate things, and be willing to spend time to figure out what you do well and what you don't do well, and that will put you in a position to win. That's my approach every day. What do I do well, and how can other people help me? And I start there. And so I'm willing to be vulnerable. The next thing is that you want to put processes and systems in place and not just rely on your gut or just say, I'm going to wing it today. So you need to have a system saying, okay, these are the steps I take when it comes to budgeting. I get this amount of money. I'm going to put some money away for emergencies, some money away for this, some money away for fun, some money away for groceries. So you're starting to have systems and processes. And systems and processes is not just about like doing day-to-day activities, but also some spiritual things. You may say, all right, this is the way I feed my soul. This is the way I'm going to prepare for the upcoming week. I don't want to get burned out. So you have systems and processes so that you're not overwhelmed. You know how to process things because in many respects, what you really control is how do you respond to things versus letting them get under your skin. And so I think that those are some daily things I do. You want to be vulnerable. You want to actually put together your own board of directors. You actually want to take steps, practical steps, to put in place processes and systems so that you don't get overwhelmed with things.
Yeah. What are probably the biggest mindset mistakes people keeping people stuck financially?
I think the biggest thing that keep people stuck is that we tend to tell ourselves, I can't get started until I have a certain amount of money. I just can't get started. And what I always tell people is that, look, in order to become, like, I'll take real estate for an example. If you want to become wealthy in real estate, you only need two out of three things. One is knowledge, and that knowledge can be obtained through conversation, it can be obtained through work experience, or it can be obtained through books or just learning from classes. So, one is knowledge. Number two is the deal. You have to be able to find the deal. You find a good deal, you're going to be able to sell that to someone. And the third thing is money. So, if you have two out of three, like when I started, I just had the knowledge and I can find a deal. I spent all my time doing those two things, and then the money will eventually come. And that money can be, like I was talking about, understanding financial capital. That money could be you're using a credit card to put some money down for a down payment or do the renovations. Are you using hard money lenders? Are you find a partner? Are you taking classes that will give you closing costs credit, a grant for closing costs? Or you're figuring out that if you buy in your personal name, you have down payment flexibility. So you can use the NACA program and buy a 1 to 4 unit apartment building or a duplex or a triplex. So it's like using that knowledge, and then you find the deal, then you'll get the money. So I think what hold us back is that we have this idea that everything has to be perfect, or that I need to have a whole lot of money in order to move forward. Instead, I want you to pull back and I want you to be scrappy. I want you to say, you know what? If I'm in this area, I'm going to try to figure out, get as much knowledge, because the riches are in the niches. I'm going to be really good at this one or two things, and then I can find deals, I can apply it, and then the money will follow. People will say, I want to partner with you. I like the way Ryan thinks. He seems like he understands this market. I like that deal that he just presented. I'm willing to go in with him. And so I think that that is one thing that we tend to miss when it comes about making money.
Nice. So most of your deals were made without the finances, right? You
Yeah,
just
so
went in.
so the way I had started, and a lot of people were telling me, hey, you should buy in an LLC, your first couple of properties. I disagree. When you buy in your personal name, there are a number of benefits. When you buy in your personal name, be mindful, prior to the Great Recession, you can only have 4 mortgages in your personal name on a property. After the Great Recession, the government changed the rules. They let you get up to 10 mortgages in your personal name. And so they did that to stimulate the economy. And when they did that, when you buy in your personal name, there are a number of benefits. You can get a 30-year amortization, meaning you get 30 years to pay off the mortgage, versus when you typically buy in your LLC, your amortization is based on 25 years, but you have to pay it off in 5 typically. The in the personal name, you get a 30-year fixed mortgage. When you do an LLC, it's normally fixed for 5 years. You have to pay it off or you have to refinance. The other thing is that your interest rate is lower in your personal name. It's much lower, sometimes 100 to 200 basis points. That means that if the interest rate is 5% in your personal name, it's going to be 7% in the LLC. You actually get down payment flexibility when you buy in your personal name. So you can put down 5%, 0%, 3.5%, depending on if you do a NACA program, FHA program, or you're a doctor or a lawyer. There are a number of programs. Now, when you buy an LLC, you have to put down a minimum of 20%. So therefore, you have down payment flexibility. Your interest rate is much lower. You also get a longer time to pay it off. Your insurance premium is lower, and also your closing cost is lower in your personal name versus an LLC. So my first 9 or 10, my first 9 properties, then I wound up buying another one. But the first 9 properties I got in my personal name and got the mortgage tied to it, so I can take advantage of those benefits. And I think a lot of people don't realize that once you have that knowledge, you can find the deal, you eventually put yourself in a position to win. So that was how I initially started. Then I started buying apartment buildings later.
Nice. How can someone start building generational wealth with limited resources?
And so I think the way you build generational wealth is exactly what I was talking about, where you start really small and you start to build these processes in place and these systems in place. So I started with 1 property in 2009, and by 2018 I got to 9 rental units. But I was slow and very deliberate. Everybody said you're moving too slow, KR. I always tell people, run your own race at your own pace. Don't let no one make you go fast or make crazy decisions. I never use hard money lenders. So I decided that I was going to keep my 9 to 5 job and live off of that. And then what I was going to do is save my cash flows from my investment properties to move forward. And so when you own real estate, and you don't sell, there are 4 benefits that you will get. One is you're going to get the cash flow. That's pretty much your revenue minus all your expenses and your mortgage. Then you get the cash flow. Number 2, you're going to get the tax benefits. You get to write off a lot of stuff, interest expense, you get depreciation with real estate. So you have the cash flows, you have the tax benefits. The third thing is property appreciation. So as inflation goes up, the value of the property is going up. Either that's naturally, but you also can force the appreciation by doing repairs. The last thing is going to be debt pay down. So as you're paying down the mortgage, you are actually building more equity. So again, you're getting the cash flow benefit, you're getting the tax benefit, you're also getting the debt pay down benefit, and you're getting the appreciation benefit, property appreciation. So why I had my 9 to 5 job living off that, I was taking advantage of those 4 factors. And that is how I was able to go from 1 unit in 2009, 9 units in 2018, 35 rental units in 2019, and 105 rental units in 2020. And now I'm at 160 plus. Because of that approach, believing in the idea of delayed gratification, where you are willing to wait, and also believing that success does not like speed, where you take your time and you do what I had mentioned earlier, the 3 Ds, the 3 Cs, and the 3 Rs. 3 Ds: desire, discipline, determination. 3 C's: intellectual capital, social capital, and financial capital. And the 3 R's, which is track record. Establish a track record, build meaningful relationships, and your reputation will precede you.
Yeah. What does financial freedom really look like beyond the social media hype?
So for me, financial freedom is very, very different from what you see the social media people talk about. And in my idea, a lot of people talk about generational wealth, which is a north to south process. Pretty much, I buy something, and then 40 years from now, family members or friends or whomever will inherit it, which is nice. I came up with what I call transformational wealth, which is an east to west concept where I become successful. I start a business. I use an example: real estate. I convinced my brother to get a real estate law license. So when I do $1 million deal, he gets a 3% commission. So therefore, he's getting $30,000. He was able to buy a house for him and his wife and 6 children in the suburb of Philadelphia. Now they have ownership, but they're also making money. I also hire his in-laws. They were able to move out of the apartment, and they own a duplex now. I also hire some friends, and I also partner with friends. So one of my business partners, he had 0 units in 2018. Now he has over 100 rental units. And so transformational wealth is not like something you do 50 years from now. It's something you do today. So when my brother's walking down the street with his son and they look at my building and says KR Apartments, he get to say, oh, he doesn't say, oh, that's the building we work for your uncle. He get to say we're also owners, because with my LLCs, I give people in my family, friends, I give them equity in my LLCs, and they don't have to contribute money because I want to transform their lives today. So for me, financial freedom is not necessarily that you just hit a number. It's that you make enough money that you can leave your job and you can decide what you want to do every single day, but you also can be a positive influence in people's lives around you financially. So I wanted to make sure when I left my job that I make enough money to cover my day-to-day expenses, but also enough money for vacation, and also an extra amount of money that I can give to family members for emergencies or what have you, but also set it up so I can provide for other people, because I'm really big on this idea of community made versus self-made. So I don't mind helping you if you decide you be humble enough to cut some grass, you're humble enough to clean an apartment, you're humble enough to be a real estate agent. I want to give you a chance and meet you where you are. So for me, financial freedom means not just me personally, but freeing people in my inner circle.
I love it how you're helping out everybody in your circle and bringing them up with you.
Yes, yes. It's so much easier that way. You don't have to face animosity when you come home for the holidays. You just run into them. They're like, oh, we just waiting for you to die. Everybody keep talking about this generational wealth. I'm like, let me help y'all out now.
I love it.
But I want to make sure that you guys check out my book, Can't Break Me. I know we talked about it a lot. If you go to my website right now, you can get the pre-log for free. It's Can't Break Me. My website is KAYR Motivates, and that is my handle on social media as well. KAYR Motivates. Um,
Awesome. How should young professionals think differently about wealth and ownership?
I think that what we really need to do is shift our mindset in the conversation from this idea that instant gratification, that you can have this microwavable type of wealth. That is not realistic. In every profession, whether that playing tennis or golf or even becoming a doctor or becoming a successful real estate investor, this is my 17th year. Success takes time. So when we think about wealth, we need to be honest and say sometimes the sexiest wealth is the boring wealth that is growing over time. Because if you're trying to go win the lottery, the odds are against you. You think you're going to get in the NFL, the odds are against you. So you might as well cash your bucket where you are and let's get to work, roll up our sleeves, let's be patient, and let's understand what I say, especially because I grew up with nothing. The number one rule is return of investment. I want to make sure my investment come back to me. And then the second thing is return on investment. So it's very important that you get your basis together, that you have a strong foundation, and from there you'll be able to build wealth.
Yeah, I love it. How do you stay resilient after all the setbacks and personal loss you've been through?
So for me, what I do is, and I mentioned my board of directors, it's so important that you have a team that you can rely on. I came up with that concept because I was reading about CEOs and how they would meet with the board and help them make decisions. And I started to think about myself as a company when I was in eighth grade. And I said, I need to find a board of directors. And that board of directors is not just family members, but professionals in various settings, whether that is a licensed therapist or a nurse, or whether that is a teacher, a minister. And so I'm getting help on multiple fronts so that I am not overwhelmed. So I never think that I'm alone. So I don't have suicidal thoughts. And so I have family members where I can call, like a great one of my aunts, and she's like 90, and I call her and she'll always say, I'm your lawyer, what's going on? That's my baby. If they get on your nerves, I'll be up there ready to fight them, even though I know she probably get beat up, but I know she'll be giving the best she got. And so for me, I'm able to stay resilient because I have put in place a team and processes and systems that help me recharge. So I set strong limits to say, all right, look, I have a firm cutoff. I want to do this before I got to get ready for bed. I want to read. I want to go for a walk. I want to have dinner. So you got to protect your peace and have people who care about you that will just pour into you versus just always taking from you.
Yeah, I think I've realized that too, going through a lot of stuff that there's you have to be able to recharge because some people can't fill you back up.
That is so true. Yep, yep. It's very difficult to fill other people up when your cup is empty. So I
Yeah,
always say, hey, look, these are the steps I have to take in order to make sure I'm on my best, I'm in the best position I can be to help people and to help myself. But the first person you have to save is yourself before you think about saving anybody else, because you're going to spread yourself too thin, and that's where you get burnt out.
yeah. How can people get a hold of you?
You guys can reach me on Instagram, on TikTok, on YouTube, my website. My handle is KAYR Motivates. That's KAYR Motivates. My website is KAYRmotivates.com. And I respond to emails, info at KAYRmotivates.com, and we're doing some exciting stuff. I hope that you guys stay in touch. I teach a free course on Instagram as well, and the best way to reach me, KAYR Motivates on all social media, KAYRmotivates.com.
Awesome, and I'll put that in the show notes for everybody too. Is there anything we haven't covered that you want to talk about?
I think number one, I think you did an amazing job. I think you covered everything. But I want to just stress this is that despite what it may look like right now, I know it's a really tough time for a lot of people in the world right now and trying to make sense of things with gas prices out of control and some people losing jobs and family members. And just know that you are not alone, that there are people out here who care about you, who want you to be successful. And so all you have to do is click that switch and say, look, I'm not going to let my past define my future. I'm going to do everything in my power to start shifting my mindset and building the life that I know I deserve. And so that's the only thing I would like to leave the audience with.
I love it. Awesome. All right. Final question. What is one piece of advice you'd like to leave our listeners with about overcoming adversity?
The number one thing I want you to understand, and I do not want you to forget this, the number one thing is that you got to get the 3Ds down. That's the basis of everything. You got to have that desire. You got to want more out of life. You got to. It starts there. But remember that desire alone doesn't get results. So you got to be disciplined day in and day out, even when nobody's clapping, even when you're by yourself and you just doing the work. And then you got to be determined because we all face setbacks. Get punched in the face, somebody uppercut us, and we start to doubt if we can keep going. You got to be determined. Keep coming out that corner swinging. So I would say that's the number one takeaway is the 3Ds: desire, discipline, determination.
I love it. So true, too. Well, KR, I can't thank you enough for coming on here and sharing your story and great insight with all of us.
Well, I want to just say thank you again. I enjoy being on your platform. I look forward to continue to stay in touch. And I hope you guys will reach out at KAYR Motivates on all social media.
Yes, sir. Well, guys, that's going to be all the time we have here today. Remember, the only way to get what you want is go through the fire.